Well, Nick Collier here again, and it's story time. This story takes place probably in about the early 80s sometime. It was coming up on Christmas time, and I just didn't feel like going to the family, and I didn't feel like doing Christmas with anybody. And my buddy Steven and I hatched this plan. We decided we would jump on a plane and fly to Mexico City, and you know, route around Mexico for a couple of 3 weeks or so, and see what trouble we could get into. I might have been 29, 30, somewhere in there. So we jump on a plane, we fly down to Mexico City, we fly into Mexico City and spend 3 days just kind of running around the city itself. And I said, hey, we really need to get out of this city. And he says, yeah, let's go to Palenque, which is about a 24-hour train ride from Mexico City east to the Yucatan. And he says, there's some Mayan ruins that I want you to see, and I want to see them. And it turns out that Palenque has these little mushrooms that grow in cow pies that are very psychedelic. And of course, in the 80s, that was the topic of conversation, was psychedelics. So actually, the 60s and the 70s and 80s. We were very excited. So we went and we got a ticket, and we got, and we got a Pullman ticket, which is like, you know, the most expensive train ticket you can get, and it was like $16 or something like that to go on a 24-hour run, probably 1,500 miles. These days that would be like $2,400. So anyhow, we decided, okay, we got all our gear together, and we went down to the train station, and we hung out and waited for the train, and finally loaded on the train, and the train took out of the station, and it was like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that, and we were like, yeah, you know, we'll get something to eat in the dining car. And so we take off. We start out, you know, it takes a good hour to get out of Mexico City, and turns out they forgot to hook up the dining car. So we and everybody else on the train, except for the locals who were used to this kind of action, who had little food stashed in their pouches and stuff, we pretty much didn't have anything to eat. No dinner. I think there was a couple of candy bars or something like that. So, you know, you swing with the punches, right? So the train kind of rumbles through the countryside, through the jungles, and by morning we're pretty hungry, and so the train at that point, it starts stopping at about every 10 miles at some little train platform. It let a couple people off and another couple people get back on. And while it was stopped, and literally it would only stop for like 2 minutes, we jump off the train and run onto the platform where they had papayas hanging out, and, you know, all this kind of stuff that they were going to put on a train and haul to another place. And also there were people there selling things that they made that you could eat. And so we bought up a bunch of stuff, jumped back on the train, and took off. And, you know, that happened throughout the day, actually. And we got hungry again. They'd jump off the train and then get back on real quick before the train took off. So we get to Palenque, and the train pulls into Palenque. It's like 11 o'clock at night, and we're starving, and we decided that we'd go over to this little snack bar. You know, they had potato chips and just the absolute worst food. But we were hungry, and so we went over there and we bought up a bunch of stuff, and we ate stuff and drank some beers, and just had a great time. And unknowingly, all the cabs were kind of waiting for the train to arrive, and people got on the cabs, and it was a 5-mile trek back to Palenque, the little town. But we didn't know that, and after about 15 minutes, the train takes off, the cabs are gone, and we're standing there by ourselves in the middle of nowhere. And there's, it's the middle of the jungle with this train track going right through the middle of it. And then literally everybody else disappears. And as soon as the train takes off, the little snack bar or whatever it was closes down, turns off all the lights, and there's no lights, there's no nothing. The only light is this one big spotlight up on the loading platform. And the people that we saw during the time that we were getting snacks seemed a little bit sleazy to us, and we were a little bit concerned that they were sitting there waiting for unsuspecting tourists. And so, there was no place to sleep. There was no, we were literally on this loading platform with this one big spotlight. And we decided, okay, here's what we'll do is I'll stand guard over Stephen for a couple of hours, and then he'll stand guard over me. And we'll keep an eye out for any robbers or, ne'er-do-wells. And it turned out that wasn't the reason why we were standing guard over each other. We literally were protecting each other from snakes and spiders because it was the only light in, miles around, and every critter in the world came towards the light. And so, I'd kick a snake off of the platform because it was going for Stephen, and or there'd be a spider crawling towards him, and I'd be keeping an eye out, and I'd get a stick and kind of maneuver the spider away from him. And they were all focused right on him, and then when I was sleeping, he was doing the same thing. And morning finally came around, and there were no robbers, there were no thieves, there were just critters. Oh, and by the way, there were just an amazing array of bugs, and they all were going for the light. And there was this, I remember distinctly, there was thousands of different kinds of bugs, and big bugs too, and I remember this one bug. It was probably the size of a small dinner plate, and it had this, it was kind of like a big flat ladybug, except that, and it had this hard shell surface, right? So it'd open up its little shell surface, and they'd open up its wings, and it would take off, but it was really bad at flying. And it would fly right for the light and just slam against the wall and fall down to the ground and spend the next 5-10 minutes trying to turn itself upright. And then once it got itself upright, it'd open up its wings again and shoot back for the light. And this went on all night long. Anyhow, then there was a bunch of bugs like that. Next morning, we were relieved. The next train comes in, and the cabs show up, and we jump a cab real quick and go into Palenque. Now the trip during Palenque, which we stayed for 4 or 5 days, was delightful. But I want to talk about after we left Palenque. We decided to go to Merida, which is at the northernmost tip of the Yucatan Peninsula. And it's about a 12-hour drive, or yeah, to Merida. And so we figured out that there was a bus that would take us to Merida. And you know, the bus ride was $6 or something like that. And and it was the only bus. And so we get on the bus, and it's, you know, a 1950s vintage, kind of a school bus. It might have been a Greyhound or something like that, but it was, you know, and it was, you know, a stick shift. So the guy gets in the bus, and we take off, and we, you know, hit a bunch of stops and pick people up and drop people off, and people are getting on with their chickens and their pigs and stuff, and you know, it was pretty comical actually. You know, and then get off a couple of stops later or something like that, and finally gets out of this the township area, and starts traveling, you know, out in open country, and it's probably, you know, dinner time, maybe a little bit later. And you know, I'm dozing, I'm falling asleep, and he's just going through the countryside, shifting his gears in 10 forward gears. And he's like having fun shifting his gears, you know. And so at about, I don't know, 10 o'clock at night or so, I wake up, and this guy is just blasting down the highway. I mean, he's probably doing 80, and it's a little two-lane, and it's not only a little two-lane, but it's kind of going through these foothills, so there's a lot of turns and going it down and coming up, and he's shifting gears like a champ, like, you know, like a race car driver, and he's sliding around turns. I mean, literally. And both Steve and I woke up during one of those slides around turns. The wheels are going squealing as they're going around the turn. I mean, this guy's catching turns like, you know, just barely making it. And we're like, whoa, what's going on? And so he's, you know, just in and out and up and down around these bends. And he'd come up behind a car, and he'd like flash his lights, and he'd take that car on an outside bend. I mean, literally going around an outside bend, he'd pass this car. And the way he did it was pretty unique. He would flash his lights at the car, and then he would turn off his headlights and take off around the car. And after it took a few times to realize what he was doing, he turned off his headlights so he would see headlights coming from the other direction. Right. And he used the other car's headlights to see the road. And I was like, really? So, you know, and he's sliding around turns, and he comes rolling into this like gasoline station with snack bar and, you know, a hamburger stand and all of that. And he rolls into this station, and he stops, and he says, "Okay, everybody out, go have dinner. Get a, you know, my cousin Manuel owns this, and you know, and he sells it to us." And we're all like, we get out of the bus, and there's like 30 of us, you know. We get out of the bus, and we go inside of the little thing, and they have, you know, hamburgers you wouldn't dare eat. The meat had been there for months. And so we got some snacks that were in bags, and water that was in a bottle. And after 45 minutes, all piled back in the bus and took off. And it was obvious that he was racing through the wilderness to make up for time to be able to stop at his cousin's. And then as we take off, he does the same thing. And we go through this little town, you know, and you have to understand, it's New Year's Eve. And I didn't realize it. But we're going through this town, and it's about midnight. And we could see on the other street this parade. And, you know, people shooting off fireworks. And, you know, every time you'd come to a cross street, you look down the street, and there's fireworks, and then it'd be the next block before you'd see it again. And, you know, we went through this entire town. There was this long parade of stuff going on. But he was one block over. And the way he went through this town, and every block had a red light, right? Lights. And he would come to the red light and turn off his headlights and just blow right through that red light. I mean, he must have blown through 20 red lights going through this town, doing about 80 miles an hour. I mean, this guy didn't let off the gas at all. Just whoa, straight on through. And we're like, boom, 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 looking at the parade. And it was just like, the fact that we actually made it, and the you know, you just assume that this guy did this every night, or maybe once a week, or something like that. But we finally made it to Merida, and we were safe and sound, and this bus had probably burned through a half a set of tires by the time he got there. And hey, that was our Mexico trip. This is Dick Collier checking out.